Let's talk about step 7. This is rehab. This is not just losing weight. This process is dealing with an addiction and what to do about it. And then we'll do kale chips. Now this brings me to the next step. Step 7. You need to understand that this is not just about losing weight and losing fat. This is fighting an addiction. Bread, beer, sugar, Lucky Charms, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, pizza, all of these things are an addiction. And as part of this plan, we're fighting this addiction. You need to understand that and plan for it. Maybe it's time to refer back to step 1 and step 2. What is your reason why? Is it strong enough to support step 2, which is what are the items that you're willing to give up? Again, this is an addiction. Think of it that way and take this seriously. The real question becomes, what are you addicted to? And you can tell because those are the things that you're most resistant to giving up. As you're making the list, some things are going to be easier to give up than others, right? I almost never drink beer, so that's easy for me to give up, right? I'm not addicted to that. Bread, pizza, donuts, those things are super difficult for me to give up. And I have almost no willpower when they're in front of me. I am addicted to sugar and bread, apparently. It should be pretty easy to identify what those things are. What are the things that are preventing you from losing weight and losing fat? What are the things that you go back to as soon as you've completed a diet plan and you start cheating or whatever and go back and gain all the weight back? What are those things? Should be pretty easy to identify. So get it into your brain that these things are toxic, they're poison, and they're an addiction. And this lifestyle change must include fighting this addiction. Let's talk about chips. Talking about addiction brings chips and salsa to mind. I wanted to include this recipe to go along with that. Kale chips. I really want tortilla chips and salsa and guacamole and queso all the time. Those things are as hard to give up for me as donuts. Well, during this weight loss process, tortilla chips and salsa and queso and guacamole don't really fit. As an alternative, I've tried kale chips. I want to set the expectation that kale chips are not tortilla chips. They don't pretend to be tortilla chips. They don't dip into salsa or queso or guacamole at all. They fall apart, but they're pretty good. And they're crunchy, and it gives me and my addiction a chance to enjoy something crunchy that's sort of like a chip. All right, let's get into it. I really like the kale chips. You got to be careful to not overcook them because then they just kind of turn into ashes. It's kind of ridiculous, but let's get into it. They're crunchy and they're kale. There are many, many health benefits to kale. Kale is one of the most nutrient-rich plants that exist. All right, here's an article I'm going to link. It's healthline.com, the 10 health benefits of kale. Obviously, of all the super healthy greens, kale is king. All right, let's get into the recipe. What you're going to need is a bunch of fresh kale. You can buy it in a bag. I like to buy the bunch. I rinse it and dry it and chop it up into chip-sized pieces. But you're going to need a bunch of fresh kale. I like to use the spray coconut oil or avocado oil. I've used olive oil. They're all awesome, but the spray makes it super easy. You can also drizzle your oil on if you just have oil. And then I put Parmesan cheese on it. There's a number of different things you can experiment with and put on top, but I just put Parmesan cheese. Here's what you do. Preheat your oven to about 325. I've seen some recipes saying 275, and I've experimented with 350 and 425 and whatever. I find that 325 works the best for me. Cut your kale into chip-sized pieces and then discard the stems. I tend to just eat them. I imagine there's probably health benefits or nutrients in the stems also. All right, arrange your chips on a pizza pan or a cookie sheet so they can be overlapping and touching. It doesn't really matter, just kind of spread them out. I spray on my coconut oil or avocado oil just over the top and then sprinkle Parmesan cheese. You can do the kind of Parmesan that's in a bottle that's super finely ground, or I really like just the shredded Parmesan that's in a little bit bigger pieces or strips. Bake for 20 to 25 minutes, let them cool, and there you go. If you bake longer than that, they get a little more crispy, and you'll find that if you don't break the leaves off of the stems tend to be chewy and juicy and kind of awesome. So I actually don't remove the stem from the center. I don't bake the long stem that sticks out the bottom, but in the center I really like to leave that stem. Alright, that's really it. So take a look at the article on the health benefits of kale, and that might help get you past some of the bitter flavor of the kale. The oil and the crispiness and the cooking and the Parmesan cheese really take away that bitterness also and make these chips not quite as great as tortilla chips, but believable.